What could be done to prevent another tragedy like the mass shooting in Oregon this week? It is a huge question. It's a very controversial debate going on. In California, a law was signed this year by Governor Jerry Brown, a controversial law allowing family members to ask that their relative's gun be taken away because a relative is mentally ill or they're concerned that that person presents a threat. I want to talk about that more now in the wake of what happened in Oregon with California Democrat and ranking member of the House Intelligence Committee, Representative Adam Schiff. Thank you for being with me.
You bet. Good to be with you.
This is a law that many have cited in the wake of mass shootings since it was signed earlier this year. Is it a law that you support?
It is. I think it's a very important and common sense step. Poppy, these crimes are all very different, these serial killings, but there is a common denominator we find in a lot of them, and that is too easy access, too ready access to firearms by people with serious mental health problems. Often in cases where family members are aware of the mental health problems, this law empowers them with law enforcement to go to the court and essentially get a restraining order preventing them from accessing firearms. Now, often people who are mentally ill, they're more likely, frankly, to use a firearm against themselves than against others. But we've seen all too often in this country where people with serious mental illness get a gun and maybe, as it appears in the case of this shooter, they want the notoriety, they want to somehow call attention to themselves, and they see other killers have done this successfully by taking other people's lives. So this is, I think, a very important measure, and I hope that other states will follow suit.
So here's the real crux of the controversy over it. You've even got some mental health advocates and professionals who say, look, our concern is that if you do this, this is going to stigmatize those that are battling mental illness. They're not going to come seek treatment and seek help because they don't want to be categorized or they don't want their, the weapon that they lawfully own to be taken from them. Are you worried about that?
Frankly, I'm much more worried about the fact that it seems like every week, every month, we have another one of these mass shootings, and so often it's by people that are mentally ill. So that is a risk, and that's something that we're obviously going to have to keep an eye on and make sure that we're not deterring people from getting treatment. But I think at the same time that we put in place laws like this, we ought to be doing everything we can to expand the availability of mental health treatment for all Americans. I don't think that these are mutually exclusive propositions. But, as a father of a daughter who's about to head off to college, I don't want to have to worry about her ending up in a shooting like we saw so tragically this past week. No parent should have to go through what those parents you just interviewed, your fellow correspondents, had to go through. That is just such a horrible trauma. And it's a trauma not just to those families, it's really a trauma to the whole country. I mentioned one thing that I thought was really a serious indictment of our inaction on this. I was in London 2 weeks ago meeting with our ambassador there. He goes to high schools, he surveys high school kids in Britain about what they associate with America, and the #1 negative association with America is gun violence. We have to do something to stop this scourge.
We heard our Ryan Young spoke with the father of this shooter yesterday, and he called for gun law reform. Now, his son didn't live with him, but he saw his son, and he said he had no idea that his son was battling any of these mental illness issues or that he had 14 guns. How much of this falls on parents in terms of knowing, what their kids are doing, how their kids are struggling?
I think parents have a big responsibility here, and I think in many of the cases where we have seen young people commit these serial crimes, at least one of the parents was well aware of both the possession of these weapons as well as a fixation on these weapons by their mentally ill children. So yes, I think the parents have a big responsibility here. And as a country, and this is something I think the president emphasized the other day, we have to have a conversation about this as a country, in each of our communities and in each of our homes, about whether we want to have these weapons accessible, whether we want to take the risk that someone is going to use those weapons against themselves or against others, because we have just got to do something about this problem. It's sickening that every single week, it seems, we go through this terrible tragedy.
Before I let you go, I do want to switch gears here and talk about something that you said earlier this week on MSNBC, specifically focusing on the committee looking into the what happened in Benghazi. Let's roll that.
And so it's time to shut this down. What Representative McCarthy merely did was to acknowledge the truth at the very highest levels of the Republican leadership in the House. This has always been and remains all about Hillary Clinton and has very little to do with the facts of Benghazi.
Of course, you're referring to what Representative McCarthy said, talking about sort of making a link between the Benghazi Commission and Hillary Clinton's falling poll numbers. Understand that upset a lot of people on both sides of the aisle, but you're calling for the entire commission to be disbanded, to stop, not to look for any more answers in Benghazi. But 4 American lives were taken. Why should we not have more answers?
Well, because we've had 8 investigations, and I think we have all the answers that there are to be found. There really aren't any major conclusions of this new effort after 16 months, $4.5 million. And not only do we have no new insights that these other 8 investigations didn't uncover, we don't even know what we're looking for. If you ask the leadership of this select committee, what is it we're trying to find? Because the chairman has said we don't believe there was gun running, that the rumors of a stand-down order have been refuted. There was no interference by the Secretary of State in the security at the facility. So all the conspiracy theories have already been debunked. And at a certain point, you have to ask yourself, after a year and a half and all these millions spent, what are we looking for? And if we can't answer that very basic question, it's time to shut it down.
But quickly, before I let you go, to some who might say, are you trying to protect Secretary Clinton in this election? What would you say to them?
I'm trying to protect the institution of Congress, because we're going to see a multiplication of these abusive taxpayer-funded select committees already. The Republicans are talking about a new select committee on Planned Parenthood. It's going to become just another partisan tool if we continue to allow this to happen. I think the presidential campaigns can sort out whatever issues have been raised with the Secretary's use of a private email system. That's the job of the political parties. That's the job of the political campaigns. The Democrats can point out Jeb Bush used a private server for government business. That's fine. You don't need a taxpayer-funded committee to do that. And I want to see the abuse of this process come to an end.
Representative Adam Schiff, appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Thank you.